Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies. And today, I'm going to tell you about 10 underrated movies you can currently catch on HBO and HBO Max. So this is going to be a ranked list of 10 underrated movies currently hanging out on HBO and HBO Max. I'll be indicating up next to the title whether they're available on both or just HBO Max, because there's still a little bit of confusion about that. And I'll be spending about a minute per movie telling you what it is, what it's about, and why it might be worth a second look, because some of these are ones you've overlooked, and some are ones you've maybe seen and didn't really consider watching twice. Now, I completely understand that my number 10 pick did not meet expectations when it was released, but here we are over 10 years later, and Terminator Salvation holds up as a valiant effort to do something different with the Terminator franchise. Now, the Terminator franchise, while it does contain some of the best sci-fi action movies ever made, also contains some really horrific shit shows. And Terminator Salvation really got a lot of flack when it came out, but it was mostly because there was such high anticipation for it. You had Christian Bale coming off of the Dark Knight series. You had this big post-apocalyptic concept, which I had wanted to see for years. Ever since you first got glimpses of the war with the machines in Terminator and Terminator 2, I wanted to see that movie. And Terminator Salvation didn't quite live up to the hype. However, to go back and rewatch this one without all of those expectations, it really is a cool flick. It's got a cool look to it, even if it's not all the pink lasers and everything I wanted from the original movies, and some amazing sequences, some incredible shots. Yes, I understand it's not perfection. Yet, when you consider what failures that franchise has produced, this one's in the middle somewhere, and it does get extra points for really going for it and trying for something. Honestly, I think this one really just suffers from a PG-13 rating. It probably should have been rated R, and then ultimately the script is a little bit loose. It's not quite glued together as well as it could have been, but still, a strong effort, well worth rewatching if it's been a while for you. Denzel Washington makes so many good movies, it's easy and understandable to forget one every now and then. And Safe House, I think, is one of his more underrated movies. This is a hard-hitting action movie that's got a great sort of real-world spy element to it. Ryan Reynolds has a fantastic performance here. And when I said hard-hitting, I meant hard-hitting. There are some rough-looking punches thrown in this movie. It can be really violent at times, and it's got this really, I think, interesting violence to it where it's really sort of brutal and rough and down and dirty and not just shootouts and bullets and all of that. That stuff's great, but there's a little bit of a raw edge to Safe House that I think is fantastic, and it also gives you this sort of glimpse into this espionage world that does feel pretty grounded and is fairly different from a lot of what you typically see in movies. So high points for all of that stuff with this one. It also suffers from the glue not quite binding it together perfectly. So what you end up with is a less than perfect Denzel Washington movie, but it's still a pretty damn good one. Now, I love Guy Ritchie gangster movies. I think that is him at his best. He has tried to do a number of big budget movies, and some of them are successful, but easily his most critically panned movie, I think, is just criminally misunderstood, and that is King Arthur. Now, this one also suffers from expectations not being met because King Arthur is such a classic story, and Guy Ritchie did some very, very different things with it. Now, I feel like had he played this one straight, maybe he would have had a better movie, but I give high points for going for it. I mean, this movie opens up with these gigantic elephants and this big war and all these supernatural things. It looks like a metal music video or something. It's wild stuff. And it doesn't line up with what you would expect to get from a King Arthur movie. But if you could put that aside and just watch this medieval metal of a movie, it is fun. Again, this one does suffer from a PG-13 rating. It would have been much more engaging had blood been spraying out when they're swinging swords. But amazing production design on this one. It's got a cool style to it. Jude Law plays a really great villain in this. And it's got this kind of kinetic energy that Guy Ritchie is so good at, brought to a very different type of story. Far, far from perfect, but still very underrated and underappreciated, and I think watching it with the right mindset, you could really enjoy this one. Now, if you saw my Godzilla vs. Kong review, you know I'm very forgiving with movies that have giant monsters fighting. I mean, if that's the crux of the movie, then there's a lot of silliness that you can get away with if you balance everything out right. And I gotta say, Rampage with The Rock is a highly underrated movie. This is one I had zero expectations for. I'm a fan of The Rock, but these big, over-the-top CGI fest things do tend to bore me a little bit. I thought Rampage had value for days. Now, there's a lot of ridiculous, stupid stuff in this movie you'll have to overlook, but the design of the monsters is fantastic. The amount of action sequences and the variety of them really surprised me. I didn't know that they were going to do that many different things with this movie. It felt a lot meatier than a lot of the other movies in this genre tend to be. And then you get some other little gems throughout this movie. For instance, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, he's kind of playing that Negan character again, but it's fun to watch him do it, and it fits into this movie really well. And it's just much more epic and more fun than I would have expected. It is loosely based on a video game, and while movies based on video games tend to just fail really supremely at being any good, the transfer from the two different types of mediums they just have not figured out yet, Rampage is an exception. It just is a fun movie that doesn't forget to be fun, and you get a lot of extra points for that from me. Now we'll go from that over-the-top CGI fight fest to one of the driest movies, if not the driest movie on this list, Michael Clayton, which is a hard-hitting legal drama that is way more engaging than most of the things that you would see in this genre. It is extremely well directed. Obviously, it's well acted by George Clooney. Similar to Denzel Washington, that's just not a surprise, almost not even worth mentioning, but you get some amazing supporting performances as well. Tilda Swinton gives an incredible performance, one of her more subtle performances actually, but she kills it like she always does. And Tom Wilkinson, I think, gives one of his most intense performances as sort of this manic, crazed guy. And George Clooney plays Michael Clayton, who's trying to keep all these people in line. It's really interesting stuff. It's extremely compelling, beautifully shot. It's just got some great sequences in it. It's one of the best directed movies on this list, except for one more, which was actually directed by George Clooney himself. We'll get to that one later in the video. But if you're like me and you love watching a ton of movies and or binge watching shows, you know there aren't many things that pair well with binge watching like a good snack. Today's sponsor, Universal Yums, is one of the coolest snack services I've ever seen. I have been a member for about a year and have no plans to stop my subscription anytime soon. So what you do is you follow the link in the description, you sign up for one of 3 different boxes at 3 different sizes and 3 different price points, and you get a new box delivered to your door every single month, and it is absolutely packed with snacks from a different surprise country every single month. And it's delicious snacks, and I'm talking cookies, cakes, crackers, chips, candy, all sorts of different stuff, and flavor profiles and things you've never tasted before because they're coming from places like Thailand, Egypt, Russia, the Philippines, Brazil. I've had stuff from all over the world, and it's a really cool experience, especially over the last year where we have not been able to get out and enjoy the world as much as we would like to. Universal Yums has been a really cool experience that me and my wife have really enjoyed. It'll be a fun little date night on the couch that is just much more interesting and engaging than just popping on a movie and sort of passively watching it. So if that sounds like you, check out the link in the description. Sign up for your Yums box. You're not gonna regret it. It has been a ton of fun. I hope you enjoy it. But let's move on with the top 5 picks on this list.
Coke. You got any? I haven't seen a Coke in 4 months. No, it's 5 months. Oh.
I forgot I had it.
By far, the oldest movie on this list features Henry Fonda and Jack Lemmon doing their best to kill time on a naval supply ship. This movie is called Mr. Roberts and is a ton of fun. Now, this movie has been remastered. It looks beautiful. It's Technicolor in sort of all its glory, but it is very dated. You will notice as soon as you start watching this movie that it's fairly slow paced. There's long scenes of people talking in the beginning, which is a pace that audiences used to be used to, not so much anymore, but if you give this one some time, these guys have a ton of fun on this boat. And while it is technically family friendly, they are trying to get women on the boat for you know what. They're making whiskey out of medical supplies. It's just kind of a wild time on this boat. And there's a very good story at the heart of it. It's a very, very good classic movie. If it's been a while since you've watched anything of this nature, Mr. Roberts is exceptional. I highly recommend it.
I'm declaring war on anybody who sells drugs in our community.
But Black Dynamite, I sell drugs to the community.
Now, what I consider to be one of the most underrated comedies of all time is also a personal favorite of mine. Honestly, it's probably in my top 10 comedies of all time, and that is Black Dynamite. In fact, I used to have a black sports coat that I would call Black Dynamite because I love this movie so much. So this stars Michael Jai White and a ton of other actors you're gonna recognize. And it is a spoof on classic blaxploitation movies, and it is fun from beginning to end. There's a lot of racial humor in this, there's a lot of movie humor in this, but it's mostly just silly, ridiculous jokes that are just a ton of fun, all performed by really great comedy actors that are absolutely killing it. I love everything about this movie. The jokes are fantastic. Michael Jai White, who is a trained fighter, is not only shredded and fighting people in this movie, he's doing it in one of the funniest ways possible. There's a fantastic gag with a boomerang. Fair warning though, there's quite a bit of nudity in this movie. It's mostly of the female persuasion, but not all. And some of it is very offensive, but it's almost always funny. In fact, if you loved Dolomite Is My Name with Eddie Murphy and Wesley Snipes on Netflix, then I think you will really like Black Dynamite. It's a little raunchier, it's a little more irreverent than Dolomite Is My Name, but still in a similar vein and in the similar type of fun. Speaking of Dolomite Is My Name, I'm a lifelong Wesley Snipes fan. I love what he did in that movie. I mostly love his action movies though, but Blade 2 stands out in a way that most action horror sci-fis do not. This one is directed by Guillermo del Toro, and I think is easily the strongest of the series, and I do like that series. But Blade 2 has an incredible, bright, colorful, glossy look to it. The villain is really impressive. The visual effects are great. The fight sequences are great. And ultimately, you get a pretty good story that's really rich, detailed, and has a lot going on that helps support all of the action on screen. Guillermo del Toro is one of my favorite directors. In terms of action movies, I think this is one of his best. And this one stands on its own. While I do recommend watching the whole series, you can easily sit down, watch Blade 2, understand it from beginning to end, and enjoy it as a standalone movie, which is not typically the case with sequels. Again, not a perfect movie, but severely, severely underrated. Now, I love a good buddy movie. In fact, some of them are just in the movie Hall of Fame, movies like Lethal Weapon. But one that gets overlooked that I think is just one of the best ever made is Midnight Run, starring Robert De Niro and Charles Grodin. Now, in this movie, Robert De Niro plays a bounty hunter who is sent to bring in a white-collar criminal played by Charles Grodin. That's the setup. That's about all you need to know. But essentially, what you get with this movie is a cross-country road trip, and both of these guys play off each other in a way that's different from anything you see them do in other movies, but also different from any other buddy movie. There's really fantastic banter in this. There's some hilarious scenes, and unlike some of the ones towards the bottom of this list, the glue that ties this movie together is perfect. This is a near perfect movie. Is it the best movie Robert De Niro's ever done? No. Is it the best sort of buddy action comedy movie he's ever done? Easily, by far, it's not even close. Now, my number one pick might be in my top 10 movies of all time. I say might because that's really hard to quantify. Believe me, I've tried. But I do consider this to be one of the most overlooked movies of all time, and that is Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. Now, this is George Clooney's first time in the director's chair. It's easily the best movie he's ever directed, despite another one earning some Academy Award nominations. This is his best work. Sam Rockwell stars in this. This is also some of his best work, and he's one of my favorite actors. It's an amazing mixture of comedy and drama that works here better than it works most other places. This is based on the memoirs of Chuck Barris, who's most famous for creating a series of game shows like The Dating Show, The Gong Show. But his memoirs included details of him being an international assassin. Now, no one knows whether that's true or just for fun, but this movie presupposes that it is true, and it is a fantastic ride. This is actually written by Charlie Kaufman, who's most famous for movies like Being John Malkovich and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and this is easily his least weird script. It still is kind of weird. But again, this movie hits on all cylinders. You got a small but great performance by Julia Roberts, Rutger Hauer, Drew Barrymore. And if you're paying real close attention, you'll also see Brad Pitt and Matt Damon for about 2 seconds total in the movie, but it is a fantastic, fun ride. It's got heavy elements, light elements. It's a really well-rounded movie. I love it. It's, like I said, an all-time favorite of mine. If you're a big fan of my recommendations, do not sleep on this one. Watch it soon because I do not see it on streaming services often, which is why you don't hear me talk about it on this channel very much. But that is the list. Let me know in the comments below what you look forward to watching the most. Also, help me thank the Patreon supporters. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, there's a link in the description. But above that, there's a link to become a channel member right here on YouTube. If you sign up for that, not only will you be supporting the channel, but you will get access to exclusive videos so that you never run out of good movies to watch. But I will keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for watching this HBO list, and you will see me on the next one.